Okay, as every normal human being knows, especially Americans, it is impossible to keep up with the spillage of information about Donald Trump's crimes. It is impossible to keep up with it. It is like holding a cut-off Dixie cup during a torrential downpour and trying to catch the entirety of the rain. It is impossible. Drumpf is so criminal, stories start spilling out between the seams everywhere. The questions are all still the same. Primarily, when will Republicans try to even act like Americans? Right now, they are all U.S. traitors, protecting and enabling a pathological liar, fraud, U.S. traitor, and idiot, while furthering and disseminating Russian propaganda that hurts our national security. All of this in order to protect this gigantic hunk of shit, Donald Trump. In order to believe lying, penniless fraud Trump was told over 15,000 documented lies in 3 years, that everyone is lying about Trump's already admitted crimes. That's what you are supposed to believe, that a lying liar, fraud, idiot, and criminal is telling the truth once. It was self-funding its 100% donor-funded election campaign. Mexico will be paying for its stupid wall. And it won't even show its taxes. That everyone is lying about Trump's already admitted crimes. That's what you're supposed to believe, that a lying liar who lies and lies and lies and lies with every single breath is somehow telling the truth, and everyone else is lying. In Trump's perfectly criminal Ukraine call, which only a brief, highly redacted excerpt has been publicly disclosed, Trump is already guilty of bribery and extortion, 2 felonies. And Trump's own lackey, swamp creature Muck Mulvaney, has already publicly attested to.
The latest bombshell came from Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney admitting there was indeed a quid pro quo to pressure Ukraine, and that followed the brazen announcement that the president is awarding the G7 summit to his own Florida resort. And it was our Jonathan Karl who asked that question that got the extraordinary answer from Mick Mulvaney. He starts us off this morning from the White House. Good morning, John.
He is the official who the president directed to freeze aid to Ukraine. And when he responded to my questions, he was crystal clear about why the president wanted him to do it. So the demand for an investigation into the Democrats was part of the reason that he ordered to withhold funding to Ukraine.
The look back to what happened in 2016 certainly was part of the thing that he was worried about in corruption with that nation. And that is absolutely appropriate.
But to be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo. It is funding will not flow unless the investigation into the Democratic server happens as well.
We do that all the time with foreign policy. And I have news for everybody. Get over it.
In order to believe Trump's insidious lies, you would have to believe Trump's $1 million donor, Gordon Sondland, is lying when he said everyone is asking about whether there was a quid pro quo. Was there a quid pro quo? Yes. That's the answer. And there are clips of him saying it, in case you missed it. It was in his opening statement.
Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and I worked with Mr. Rudy Giuliani on Ukraine matters at the express direction of the President of the United States. We did not want to work with Mr. Giuliani. Simply put, we were playing the hand we were dealt. We all understood that if we refused to work with Mr. Giuliani, we would lose a very important opportunity to cement relations between the United States and Ukraine. So we followed the president's orders. As I testified previously, Mr. Giuliani's requests were a quid pro quo for arranging a White House visit for President Zelensky. Mr. Giuliani demanded that Ukraine make a public statement announcing the investigations of the 2016 election DNC server and Burisma. Mr. Giuliani was expressing the desires of the President of the United States, and we knew these investigations were important to the President. I was adamantly opposed to any suspension of aid. I was adamantly opposed to any suspension of aid, as the Ukrainians needed those funds to fight against Russian aggression. I tried diligently to ask why the aid was suspended, but I never received a clear answer. Still haven't to this day. In the absence of any credible explanation for the suspension of aid, I later came to believe that the resumption of security aid would not occur until there was a public statement from Ukraine committing to the investigations of the 2016 elections and Burisma, as Mr. Giuliani had demanded. I know that members of this committee frequently frame these complicated issues in the form of a simple question. Was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes. Mr. Giuliani conveyed to Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and others that President Trump wanted a public statement from President Zelensky committing to investigations of Burisma and the 2016 election. Mr. Giuliani expressed those requests directly to the Ukrainians, and Mr. Giuliani also expressed those requests directly to us. We all understood that these prerequisites for the White House call and the White House meeting reflected President Trump's desires and requirements. Everyone was in the loop. It was no secret. Everyone was informed via email on July 19th, days before the presidential call. As I communicated to the team, I told President Zelensky in advance that assurances to run a fully transparent investigation and turn over every stone were necessary in his call with President Trump.
You'd have to fully discount the testimony by drumpf's own hand-picked staff, like General Kelly, staunch Republican John Bolton, in order to believe lying piece of shit fraud drumpf, whose own charity it used to pay its own past due bills and bad debts. You'd have to believe that it is telling the truth for once, and all these other ultra-patriots are lying. Decorated veteran and West Point graduate William Taylor, who wears a combat infantry badge, who was hand-picked by criminal and idiot drumpf flunky Mike Pupio.
I want to go to the end of the timeline where you learned that security assistance was conditioned on Ukraine announcing the investigations that the president wanted. And in particular, on September 9th of this year, you texted Ambassador Sondland and Volker. And the text message should be on the screen in front of you. And if you could read what you wrote.
As I said on the phone, I think it's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign.
What did you mean when you said you thought it was crazy?
Ms. Goldman, I meant that because of the importance of security assistance that we had just described and had a conversation with the chairman, because that was so important, that security assistance was so important for Ukraine as well as our own national interest, to withhold that assistance for no good reason other than help with the political campaign made no sense. It was counterproductive to all of what we had been trying to do. It was illogical. It could not be explained. It was crazy.
When you say all of what we were trying to do, what do you mean by we?
I mean that the United States was trying to support Ukraine as a frontline state against Russian attack. And again, the whole notion of a rules-based order was being threatened by the Russians in Ukraine. So our security assistance was designed to support Ukraine. That's it. It was not just the United States. It was all of our allies.
When you reference help with a political campaign in this text message, what did you mean?
I meant that the investigation of Burisma and the Bidens was clearly identified by Mr. Giuliani in public for months as a way to get information on the two Bidens.
And that investigation, at the very least, was mentioned by President Trump in the July 25th phone call with President Zelensky. Is that right?
As we now know, yes. Yes, on September 25th, that transcript was released.
Ambassador Taylor, in your decades of military service and diplomatic service representing the United States around the world, have you ever seen another example of foreign aid conditioned on the personal or political interests of the President of the United States?
No, Mr. Goldman, I've not.
Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, a corruption fighter and total American hero. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, the recipient of the Purple Heart. Or Bolton's assistant, Dr. Fiona Hill, who warned GOP anti-American drumpf-supporting zealot idiots about spreading Russian propaganda, which they are doing.
I take great pride in the fact that I'm a non-partisan foreign policy expert who has served under 3 Republican and Democratic presidents. I have no interest in advancing the outcome of your inquiry in any particular direction except toward the truth. I will not provide a long narrative statement because I believe that the interest of Congress and the American people is best served by allowing you to ask me your questions. Based on questions and statements I have heard, some of you on this committee appear to believe that Russia and its security services did not conduct a campaign against our country, and that perhaps, somehow, for some reason, Ukraine did. This is a fictional narrative that has been perpetrated and propagated by the Russian security services themselves. The unfortunate truth is that Russia was the foreign power that systematically attacked our democratic institutions in 2016. This is the public conclusion of our intelligence agencies, confirmed in bipartisan congressional reports. It is beyond dispute, even if some of the underlying details must remain classified. The impact of the successful 2016 Russian campaign remains evident today. Our nation is being torn apart. Truth is questioned. Our highly professional and expert career foreign service is being undermined. US support for Ukraine, which continues to face armed Russian aggression, has been politicized. The Russian government's goal is to weaken our country, to diminish America's global role, and to neutralize a perceived US threat to Russian interests. President Putin and the Russian security services aim to counter US foreign policy objectives in Europe, including in Ukraine, where Moscow wishes to reassert political and economic dominance. I say this not as an alarmist, but as a realist. I do not think long-term conflict with Russia is either desirable or inevitable. I continue to believe that we need to seek ways of stabilizing our relationship with Moscow, even as we counter their efforts to harm us. Right now, Russia's security services and their proxies have geared up to repeat their interference in the 2020 election. We are running out of time to stop them. In the course of this investigation, I would ask that you please not promote politically driven falsehoods that so clearly advance Russian interests. As Republicans and Democrats have agreed for decades, Ukraine is a valued partner of the United States, and it plays an important role in our national security. And as I told the committee last month, I refuse to be part of an effort to legitimize an alternate narrative that the Ukrainian government is a US adversary and that Ukraine, not Russia, attacked us in 2016. These fictions are harmful even if they are deployed for purely domestic political purposes. President Putin and the Russian security services operate like a super PAC. They deploy millions of dollars to weaponize our own political opposition research and false narratives. When we are consumed by partisan rancor, we cannot combat these external forces as they seek to divide us against each other, degrade our institutions, and destroy the faith of the American people in our democracy. I respect the work that this Congress does in carrying out its constitutional responsibilities, including this inquiry, and I'm here to help you to the best of my ability. If the President or anyone else impedes or subverts the national security of the United States in order to further domestic, political, or personal interests, that's more than worthy of your attention. But we must not let domestic politics stop us from defending ourselves against the foreign powers who truly wish us harm. I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you.
Even Lev Parnas, Drumpf's bagman in Ukraine, is singing about criminal Drumpf and its Ukraine criminal conspiracy against our coming U.S. election.
What do you think is the main inaccuracy or the main lie that's being told that you feel like you can correct?
That the president didn't know what was going on. President Trump knew exactly what was going on. He was aware of all of my movements. I wouldn't do anything without the consent of Rudy Giuliani or the president.
In order to believe unelected U.S. traitor and debtor bum Drumpf, who won't even disclose its own taxes, you'd have to be a complete moron. Most of Drumpf's campaign clan is in or going to prison. One question remains for the GOP. Which of you lily-livered cowards will stand up for America instead of protecting and enabling a criminal fraud, penniless bum, debtor, sexist, racist pile of shit who despises America and is enabling our enemies and trying to disadvantage our allies? Which of you pieces of shit will finally stand up for this country instead of appeasing a drug-sniffing fraud who lies about everything with every breath and would sell out America to try and wash away some of its insurmountable, intractable billions in unpaid debts? Which of you cowards will stand up for America? America will vote blue. Look at Virginia. It was an entirely red state when Drumpf was put in undue illegal occupation by Putin. Totally red state. Now it is totally blue. Both sides of the legislature and their governor. Look at the 2018 House election. The GOP lost more seats in the House to Democrats than they ever have in U.S. history. This is a referendum on piece of shit Drumpf, and it will continue. Stupid idiots like Moscow Mitch and Leningrad Lindsay are too short-sighted, too narrow-minded, and too fucking stupid to get that once they lose power this time, and they will, mark our words, they will lose power completely this time. They're out. Laws will be written. Elections will be changed. Rules will be made that will protect our elections in the future from gerrymandering and other Republican bullshit that keeps this minority cult of scumbags in undue power. Drumpf will soon be in prison. Then what will this GOP anti-American cult whine about and complain about? They will have done this all to themselves just to protect, enable, and defend one lying fraud, traitor, and shitbag. Vote blue for any who. And this is a bit of advice for the Democrats and for the Bidens. The Bidens should testify to the Senate and repeatedly stress, since the impeachment of Drumpf for his crimes is concerned only with Drumpf's crimes, and that they know nothing of Drumpf's numerous crimes, keep repeating it, and have no first-hand knowledge of Drumpf's numerous crimes and criminal conspiracy, which the nonpartisan GAO, Government Accounting Office, said violated the law. Keep repeating that we know nothing of Drumpf's many crimes and have nothing to offer in terms of first-hand knowledge to these proceedings. Keep stressing it. Every time a Republican asks you a question, you simply start off with, I don't know anything about the numerous crimes Drumpf has committed. We know about the obstruction from Mueller's. Oh, stop. They'll want to cut him off immediately. Every opening phrase, every single word, every sentence should refer back to that they know nothing about why they're there. These proceedings are being conducted because drumpf is a criminal and has been caught committing crimes. The Bidens don't know anything about the crimes he's committed. It's like having someone from Starbucks who doesn't know anything about Jeff Dahmer, never met him, isn't a victim's family member, doesn't know anything about it, being brought into the trial to comment on their affiliation with Jeff Dahmer. They can simply keep referring to the fact that they don't know anything about Jeff Dahmer's crimes. It's idiotic that the GOP wants the Bidens, but if they're going to insist on having the Bidens should be very willing to come and should over and over and over and over and over and over keep stressing we have no direct knowledge of drumpf's crimes. We don't know why we're here. This whole proceeding is about drumpf's crimes, drumpf's crimes, drumpf's crimes. Keep bringing it back to why they're there. They are there because drumpf committed crimes. Sew it up, just like a surgical incision is sewn up at the end of the operation. You close tightly, neatly, securely, and without infection. And then it is over, it heals, and we are done with this piece of shit, drumpf, and these scumbag, Republican, anti-American, pro-Russia, commie pieces of shit. Flush them down the toilet. Vote blue for any who. Flush the turd November 3rd.